successful last year for $1.5 million.
Yeah, I think we'll show you an example of how we get your attention with a clip right here.
In June, when the hatchlings emerge, they're vulnerable. They must join the adults at the edge of the sea, but the journey will be a dangerous one. Snakes. Miss their chance.
Well, I remember when that clip went viral. I mean, it was pretty exciting to watch. We didn't get the entire suspenseful clip there, but how has the onset of digital, Twitter, Facebook. I saw from the slides earlier, apparently social media is very important.
Yeah.
How has adapting long-form content to those viral digital platforms affected how you think about commissioning content, creating content?
Well, I think if you take the program makers that went out in the field, they were out there for about 4 years doing these major landmark bits of filming, and I'll show a bit later in what we're doing on that. In the old days, I think traditional media companies would shoot, they would just be totally focused on that hour of broadcast. Right. And then maybe with the tech world, or the new world, we'd add some sprinkles on at the end for the marketing. So you think about how do we cut up the long form, how do we use it for just marketing purposes. Now the discussion is completely different. Right. So with our program makers, the people shooting this type of footage are thinking about, our partners on this were Tencent, right, which had 400 million watched that clip. 200 million went to Tencent as a partner in China, working with us on short form. Snap did special releases of short form on this programming. Right. So in all the work we're doing now, and this is really important for the tech world in some ways, is we're building that right into the commissioning brief. So I think the weaker tech companies actually are coming in at the end of the process. Producers like myself that don't want to be trapped in the old world. We want to make great content and push it through all the various channels. Right. We're thinking about this from day one. From the moment we get an executive producer and start thinking about the project, whether it be drama or natural history.
Well, you mentioned Tencent. China has become a big player in media and entertainment globally. I mean, they've injected themselves into your world, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how that's changed for you? I mean, they were not on the radar for you about 5 years ago, right?
From a Chinese perspective, what we're seeing now is a full-scale drive by them to go from be a local producer and often just monetizing stuff at what I'd call the end, forgive the jargon, but the end of the value chain. So making the toys, doing things. What you see with the Chinese players now is from a lot of companies, Western companies, were not making that much money in China.
Right.
The last 2 years, everything's changed. And my life now is more and more working at the beginning of the process with Chinese companies. So as an example, Shanghai Media Group, we're in partnership on Doctor Who, one of our strands. Right. And we're thinking about not only how we use the old programming together, but what's the future of new all of that is a deep conversation with the big Chinese groups. And then you've got the online play. So interestingly, on the natural history landmark programming we do, we used to deal with the state broadcaster alone, CCTV. We still have that relationship and it's fantastic, but we're also dealing with a major partnership with Tencent. So you get the idea.
So now a lot more trips to Shanghai and Shenzhen instead of just Beijing.
Absolutely, that's exactly right.
Right, and introducing the Chinese audience. I mean, Doctor Who was not known IP in China, right? I mean, it wasn't huge, 5 or 10 years ago. How is that, introducing a big franchise like that to China? Disney has, has done that with Star Wars. How do you think about that with Doctor Who, and do they as well leverage your BBC brand just as much as you're trying to get these?
I mean, it's a classic case of we're not arrogant enough to think we can break China.
Right.
So we will work with them on formats for our programming, and it's a much more early conversation. I mean, I think that the idea, by the way, in my business, if you're interested in content, there's not much future in just pure old-fashioned content distribution. I mean, my business 3 years ago was a lot of finished programs, just selling it around the world.
Right.
More and more our business is now owning IP. And if you guys own a bit of content, you've now got more decisions than you ever had. You used to say, hey, I'll sell it to some broadcasters. Now you've got to decide, what SVOD partner do I go with, if any? Do I go with the telcos that are coming in? Is it the right shape? Do I need to reshape it for Facebook, who are now in the market? Facebook Watch are now, YouTube Red. The market is red hot for people who can shape their content. But also, you've got a challenge of how you monetize properly between those windows. So the kind of people I'm employing now are pretty sophisticated in terms of what do I do with a piece of content territory-wise, but also by the various windows. And those people who own IP are in a great position.
Right.
If you don't own content, I think you're quite exposed in this market. If you're just a channel business, you're pretty. It's a pretty scary place.
It sounds basically like you have to think of yourselves now as sort of a blockbuster movie studio. You have to think about pre-existing IP, how to market it, how to break through the clutter, to get people's attention. Blue Planet, which you've just launched in the UK, the sequel, basically, Blue Planet 2. The way that you've gone about introducing that is very much like rolling out a blockbuster, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we are getting more and the costs, you saw a slide earlier, the costs are getting higher,
right.
The risks are getting higher, but success when it comes is a beautiful thing.
Right.
So, we've just done this thing called Blue Planet 2, and forgive me for crowing about it, but biggest program in the year for the UK. It will go on like this Planet Earth 2 did to 230 plus territories. We'll sell it everywhere. We had more young people watching that than pretty much any show in the UK. Young people. So this isn't just older audiences, and multiple co-pro partners. But we used to just do a kind of advertising trail, if you like.
Right.
We've actually cut up some content. Our prequel, as we called it, building with media partners and with digital partners, building the reputation of the show before it arrived is very similar to what J.J. Abrams was doing with Star Wars,
Right.
And I've got a clip here. We actually used our prequel that was before the show even went, because people were very scared about showing what was on the program. But actually, we went a bit further and said, no, we will show a bit. We'll get Radiohead to do a soundtrack. We'll do Hans Zimmer, and we've got David Attenborough doing the commentary. So that's not a bad lineup, and we made some content.
Let's see that clip and let them entertain us rather than have you blather on. pretty good trailer. Pretty good, or prequel.
Thank you. Thank you.
How has, we're now in the world of Netflix, Amazon. I mean, that could easily be commissioned by one of these big tech giants now. You mentioned briefly that the cost of business is going up. The way that Netflix and Amazon come in and do deals, it certainly raised your cost of acquiring. Of course, you also work with them as partners. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the double-edged sword?
I think, as you saw from the last presentation, the truth is in content now, you have to take bigger swings.
Right.
I mean, that is not a cheap business. We put the best scientists, marine biologists into the field, 1,400 hours of underground filming, underwater filming, not underground, underwater filming, huge. I mean, you say anyone can commission it. Let me be slightly pokey and say the BBC's been at natural history for 60 years. We really are very purpose-driven around this. So I'm really proud of this. It's one of the only moments I can get my children to sit next to me to watch television as well, which is a special thing.
Right.
But this thing doesn't come by magic. It comes from significant investment and having the right environment in which you can attract talent.
Right.
So, you can have all the money in the world, but if the best marine biologist in the UK doesn't want to work with you, that's the problem. And that guy at the end, our presenter, Sir David Attenborough, who's, by the way, 91 and still doing that stuff, and still as curious about innovation. That camera where you saw the walrus above ground, but you're also on all that technology is proprietary.
Right.
And we've got about 12 to plus scientific papers being written on the discoveries that series built. So the reason I'm saying that is you kind of have to have that level of belief to really cut through now. People can smell if you're not really committed.
Right.
Whether that be a drama or whether you have to commit now. So, it's not for the faint-hearted content at the moment, and that does link to your question, which is, it's the classic answer. Look, if you're a broadcaster like the BBC and running BBC Worldwide, Netflix, Amazon, all you guys who are running SVOD services, it's wonderful because you're great partners. So we sell programming, we develop programs together. So there's kind of three phases. You sell programming, you make it together, and then, by the way, you also compete for projects where you want exclusive rights. So, I hate the term frenemy or what, it's all jargon. But the truth is, the market is, I think most people are pretty grown up though, because what drives this market is great ideas. So you can get all the corporate constructions in the world, all the various deals, everything is open.
Right.
If at the end of the day you have a great writer or a great executive producer and a team who say, we want to make this content, there's lots of money out there, but the choices they make are not just about money. So worldwide, I'm really working hard to create an environment where if you're a creative, a writer or an executive producer, you're actually happy.
Right.
No, you're really happy.
Yeah.
And you're feeling like your best work is being done. The other thing about the Blue Planet team, by the way, is they got to 14 million people in a few days in the UK. And they got 41% of all TV viewing. Bluntly, that would be difficult to achieve on a subscription video on demand service, however big it is. Right. So there's still a place for big events, live events, where writers feel, the scientists feel very proud that their work is going to get to 500 million homes or whatever the number we end up with. That wasn't the number, but it's going to be a lot.
And it helps to have David Attenborough, who is basically pre-existing intellectual property himself.
Well, part of this is also about navigation and brands. So, we at one time are thinking we did the original Blue Planet that was massive in 2001. Between us and a little quiet room here, we originally thought we might call it something else. But the brutal truth, and it's a bit Hollywood, is Blue Planet 2 cuts through the clutter very quickly. So I think we are a bit more, I'll be blunt, shameless about it's a franchise, you can trust it, there's 1,000, 1,000,000 things to see of an evening, but we guarantee the quality. And the one thing we at the BBC are is the highest quality. Right. So you just have to be brutal about your marketing. Right. It's unforgiving out there, unforgiving. And I really feel strongly that you have to be strong in, very clear on that.
And has the culture around commissioning and creating these projects changed in the UK? UK's used to be a pretty clubby culture where, people went to one provider, BBC or Channel 4. Now you're in a different
Very simply, it's more competitive.
Right.
The average, if you're average, you're out the game. You've got to be exceptional. And talent have got to want to work for you. It's not just about the cash. that helps, but it's not just in our game, the creative industries. You've got to be somewhere where talent wants to be. And, you know, frankly, the average people and the average executives, they're having a stressful time.
Right. Well, so things are changing, even in the UK, even for the almost 100-year-old BBC. Thank you so much, Tim Davie. And thank you for listening to us. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Cheers.